With that, we'll get into Chapter 16, the Knights Draconic. The Dragon District didn't actually have dragons in it, except for maybe just one. So there are actually two types of court guards. There are the Knights Draconic, who are all Unicorn Arcanists, and then there's the Sky Legionnaires, which are all Pegasi Arcanists. And I think this is awesome that they're these two specific ones. Volke does mention specifically that the Pegasi come in various colors and wing types. Specifically, black Pegasi have crow wings, and the golden Pegasi have eagle wings.
And as fitting with his character, Zaxxas just thinks he can fight everybody. So he is convinced that his Phoenix is a higher tier. He's good to go. He could take them all.
Imagine if he actually read that book that Volke was reading, and it was like, I have the higher tier Eldrin. I know I can beat him.
Straight to his head.
So Lyle is actually the one escorting them to the castle, and Lyle wants to show Volke all of his friends that he's made in the Lamplighters Guild later on in Thronehold. It is kind of interesting, though, that he doesn't ask Zaxxas to come with him. He asks Volke. So they finally enter King Drake Castle. And this castle is so massive that Volke is pretty certain that the whole Isle of Ruma could actually fit within just the castle itself. We get another very clear illustration of how Arcanists treat or are treated by other regular Denzians, or mortals as Shammy calls them. This is actually kind of weird because Volke bumps into one and they kind of like freak out. They think they're about to get whipped or something, the way they act to it.
And you see a little bit from the other side as well. Some of the guilds are making negative comments, and at first Volke thinks it's about him, but then he realizes, oh, they're scolding the waiter as well. So a little bit of guilds have gotten power drunk, it seems, in some sense, and do see themselves above citizens that they're likely supposed to be protecting.
Right. And I'm interested to see how this kind of keeps panning out. Maybe this is just the castle and they're on edge because there's all these Arcanists from all over the world and they want to make a good impression. But two specific Arcanists from the Huntsman Guild actually start to go over and start pestering Addie, and I don't think Volke's really going to have any much of this.
No, they're pretty much catcalling her. It's a weird method of doing it, but they are shouting names at her.
Yeah, and then they look at Hexa, because Hexa's like, screw you guys, she doesn't care. And they end up calling Hexa a scrag, which is actually worse than calling somebody a mudblood, to be honest.
It feels like it, and based on everyone's reaction, Nicolin tries to jump in, Ilya has to grab him. There's a very, very strong reaction to being called a scrag.
Well, then Volke is about to lay down the hammer, and out of nowhere, like, Zaxxas just comes in and lays him out.
And then, of course, coming to try and clean everything up, Zelfrey coming in ready to smooth things over and try and make sure nobody gets hurt.
Now, this is where I really enjoyed, because we have Zaxxas' comment earlier about how he could take them on. Well, just one of the Pegasi Arcanists come in and just put an end to it by gusting wind through the entryway of this castle. The Knight Captain mentions that Arcanists should have restraint and patience.
And the Knight Captain is actually recognized by Volke. It's the famed Captain Rendell, so there are a bunch of stories around him and a lot of lore that Volke is familiar with.
I can imagine at this point in time, Volke is like, one, this is pretty much quoting the Pillar, and two, he's a famous Arcanist that I know I've read about. So like, OMG, like total schoolgirl, like meeting the boy band.
Little high shrieks, fangirling to the max.
Right, and before we wrap everything up, we also want to, again, remind everybody to keep an eye out on a solid release date for the Time Marked Warlock, as this is going to be coming out sometime in April. And again, this is Shammy's new urban fantasy book. So keep an eye on Amazon for when that's available. And we, like always, we'd like to thank Dan Mackison, our editor. And you can find us on Podbean, Google Podcasts, which actually will be transitioning to YouTube Music. So if you haven't switched everything over to there yet, you might want to get doing that soon if you listen to Google Podcasts. We're also on Apple Podcasts, and we have our Facebook group, and we are on YouTube. So if you want to see us as we're talking, and Dan does a great job at putting in images from the awesome source Frith Chronicles Fandom Wiki. He does a great job getting that pushed over to us as well. And if you want to get a hold of us, you can get us at frithguildpod@gmail.com or send a message to us on Facebook or comment on the page. You're also on Discord. Scott, are you on Discord yourself?
I am.
For the Capital Station Lounge?
Capital Station Lounge, yep.
So, Scott, do you have anything else to add today?
Get ready for the tournament. Coming.
Thank you for listening and stay tuned.